We are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to ATP Insights, where we cover the most important tech news in Asia. Today is Thursday, the 25th of June. And yes, I've double checked that I have the date right. 2026. Let's get right to it. From a news perspective, I want to cover this thing. SoftBank is going to go all in on AI. I don't think that should surprise anybody. There's nobody else in Asia like Masayoshi Son. We'll talk about that. And then from a guest perspective, we've got a great lineup of guests again today. Initially, we will have James Cook, Asia Pacific Group Vice President at DigiCert. He's going to join us to talk about how digital trust infrastructure helps businesses secure identities, systems, and connected devices at scale. Following that, we will welcome Kean Kang, CEO at Paydibs, to discuss how payment infrastructure can help micro SMEs modernize operations and participate more fully in the digital economy. And next, we will talk to Claire Ma, co-founder at Sign, to cover how verifiable identity and governed execution will help regulated institutions trust AI agents acting on behalf of people and organizations. And then my good friend Natcho Angelo, CEO at kuubiik, will talk about how AI-enabled outsourcing platforms are helping businesses scale execution without scaling complexity along with it. And later in the program, we'll be joined by Gregory, founder at BuildWorld, to explore how AI-native construction platforms will help builders run projects with more visibility, less waste, and better operational control. And finally, Hanis Harmiles, founder and CEO at Reinvent IP, will join us to talk about how AI native IP intelligence and trading infrastructure helps enterprises turn intellectual property into a more strategic, visible, and monetizable business asset. And before we get to all of our guests and some news, let's hear from our presenting partner, Twilio. Twilio is the secure and scalable platform to build amazing customer engagement without the complexity. With the AI-driven workflows you need to connect. They are trusted by over 300,000 businesses. It's the platform that makes more possible. Visit Twilio.com to start building today. Okay, let's get to a little bit of news. I have already mentioned that SoftBank is going to go all in on AI. There is nobody else in Asia. I mean, Asia's at some level dominated by personalities like Masayoshi Son, and via SoftBank, I really think he's like a one of one. I've been following his career for who knows how many years, 20 something years. His real breakout was getting the iPhone for SoftBank back in 2007 in Japan, when it really looked like NTT Docomo was the front runner for it. But he's done so many other things. We could spend hours actually talking about him. But let's just say this. If something big is happening in the technology world, Masayoshi Son is going to try to be invented. And he is kind of rotating a little bit here. He's making SoftBank less like a traditional technology investor and more like a leveraged bet on the full AI stack. I mean, if you think about this, the guy has literally been involved in the internet, in mobile phones, in everything that actually, and in cloud, like in everything that changed the way we compute and people use technology. And now he's betting on the AI stack. For him, the beginning of this was with ARM for compute architecture, OpenAI for frontier models, Stargate for data center scale, Intel for US-based semiconductor capacity, right? Because semiconductors are still important, and robotics as kind of this physical world extension of artificial intelligence. At their shareholder meeting, at SoftBank shareholder meeting on June 24th, so this is yesterday, in Tokyo, Masayoshi Son framed the company around super AI and set a target of raising SoftBank's net asset value to 1,000 trillion yen, or about $6.2 trillion within a decade. And I'm not saying you should buy this stock, but what I am saying is every single time this guy has gotten up onto a podium or onto a soapbox and said he was going to do something insane, half the room leaves thinking that guy's insane, and the other half of the room gets rich. That's just a fact. One of the important underlying facts here is that Son is no longer just betting on applications. He's trying to own or influence the whole infrastructure underneath artificial intelligence. Chips, power, we've already talked about him investing $30 billion in power in the United States, and eventually robotics, right? Also, clearly capital formation is important to him. He's been making money to invest money for years. And here's the other thing too. Masayoshi Son does not mind failing. He's deeply in love with failure, just to be fair. Remember, he was one of the biggest investors in WeWork, and he wrote that down from like a $9 billion investment to nothing. and just kept on going. And it doesn't matter like how old he is either. The dude, in a way, doesn't care about money per se. Money is just a way for him to keep score of things. He just cares about winning and being in the right place at the right time. So SoftBank's own AI computing segment now explicitly groups ARM, Ampere, and GraphCore together as semiconductor assets aimed at artificial superintelligence. With ARM itself, and we talked about this, I think, either on ATP or on AGTP, moving beyond IP licensing to its own data center CPU for cloud and agentic workloads. They are designing their own chips. And to be fair, when Martin and I were at Super AI in Singapore, which feels like a year and a half ago, but was really probably just like 2 weeks ago, I can't remember anymore, we spoke to the ARM team. We had them on the show. You should go watch that episode. ARM's a fascinating country, and I believe that SoftBank owns somewhere between 86 and 90% of ARM. So keep that in mind as well. So OpenAI is another pillar here. SoftBank has said OpenAI and ARM are the two essential engines of its strategic AI platform, and it's committed up to $32 billion to OpenAI. Stargate, the AI infrastructure company backed by SoftBank, OpenAI, Oracle, and MGX, was announced with an intention to invest $500 billion over 4 years. I still can't get used to this billion thing. Like if I'd said 500 million 2 years ago, it would have sounded like a ton of money. But again, this infrastructure scale investment style that's been happening in the AI space it's unprecedented, at least in my lifetime. And I've seen a lot of different stuff. And SoftBank is carrying the financial responsibility and OpenAI carrying operational responsibility for that MGX thing that we just talked about. We're going to put $500 billion into it. We can spend a lot of time actually talking about whether we think making an investment of that size is something that's reasonable or not. But the reality is that Masayoshi Son, through SoftBank, is trying to build an artificial intelligence full stack business and full stack empire. He's not just satisfied having the iPhone in Japan or just being an investor in OpenAI or just investing in power in the United States. He wants to own the chips. He wants to own the power. He wants to own the models, and he wants to own the distribution for all of this stuff, okay? SoftBank secured a $40 billion bridge loan just a couple of months ago to support further OpenAI investment and corporate needs. And S&P Global revised SoftBank's outlook to negative on their bond stuff, citing the increasing weight of OpenAI in its investment asset and weaker credit quality. But the market here is being asked to underwrite Son's conviction again, and it's very familiar territory. So the news will tell you that Alibaba was this legendary win for Masayoshi Son, and that's true. And I've already mentioned the fact that WeWork was this really cautionary tale, but again, the guy does not mind failing. He just does not mind failing. And the way this type of trading works, there's this kind of misunderstanding in the world of investment and in the world of trading as well. And I will say this. A lot of people think you have to win every time you make a trade. They'll think you have to win 80% of the time, 90% of the time, maybe even 100% of the time. But the reality is you only have to win 51% of the time. You just have to be right slightly more than you're wrong. And to be fair, SoftBank and Masayoshi Son have been right way more than 51% of the time. So they're definitely in the win column for sure. But the point is that you don't have to be. So the fact that he's made a loss on WeWork he doesn't care, and it doesn't matter to him at all. The difference here is that the bet is not just on one company, right? So it's not like when he was investing in WeWork, excuse me, when they were investing in WeWork via SoftBank, they were just like all in. They put all their chips in one company in a particular space to make money on that. But in this case, it's really a bet on whether AI becomes so large and so compute intensive and so infrastructure constrained that the companies controlling all of that stuff, the rails, the underneath stuff, right, become some of the most valuable companies in the world. So let's ask ourselves something here. And again, for anybody who's listening, if you have any questions for me now and when the guests come on, please feel free to ask us. I'll get to them as if I can, particularly when the guests are on. It could be a little bit more difficult, but we love the interaction. And if you've got a question that's relevant to one of the guests that we have on, throw it in the chat. And if I can see it in enough time and fit it in, I would love to do that. Let's ask ourselves here something, though. If SoftBank doesn't want to be a traditional investment company, what is it really trying to become if this strategy that it has begins to work? what does it mean to them to become like a full stack AI company? It almost seems like they want to be like an AI infrastructure company, not just an investor, right? And they're investing across the stack. So ARM, Ampere, and GraphCore for compute, OpenAI for model demand, Stargate for infrastructure build out, Intel for strategic semiconductor exposure, and robotics for physical AI deployment. They're just literally covering the whole stack. Look at that. ARM, one of the most popular chip styles in the world right now. In a way, like I understand the Intel association here, but how much do you think about Intel these days when you're thinking about chips? Not that much anymore, right? I mean, I think they lost a little bit of the plot when they did not get themselves involved enough in the GPU space, particularly when it came to artificial intelligence. But fair enough. The business logic that they have here is that AI value may concentrate not only in software companies. This is some place where I completely do not disagree with them, but also in the companies that control the compute, the data center stuff, the power, and the model distribution. I mean, if you think about it, and Martin and I have said this many, many times on AGTP, the show we do focused on the United States and technology news that's there. But one of the things we've realized is it may not be the case that the big model companies are the place where inside the value chain for artificial intelligence, all the value is going to be extracted. It's very expensive to train these models. And it's not like you train them once and you're done. You have to do constant training, which means constant expense. And as the equipment becomes more efficient, whether that's the chips, the overall data centers, the CPUs, and frankly, even the power can become more efficient. OpenAI and the model companies, the frontier model companies, the frontier labs, are going to have to continue to invest more money to have the best models so that they can do the best training. Now, to be fair, if you look at what's happening in China with some of the open source models, that's a place where there's going to be a lot of competition. But there's no open source power, frankly, and there's no competition for open source chip design per se. All that stuff has licensed IP associated with it. So that could potentially be a big win for excuse me, for SoftBank. And Stargate makes all this stuff explicit by calling for partners across land, power, construction equipment, and data center infrastructure. And this is why the framing that someone puts on this, like if you went and if you listen to their annual meeting this year, right, their investor meeting this year, he is describing software as a platform company for the artificial intelligence era, not as a portfolio of startups or in some way related to the tech world. They weren't necessarily related to each other. He's scrapping that for now. And he's saying, I want to invest in data centers because I know that they're going to have artificial intelligence uses. I want to invest in the chip companies because I know that the chips are going to be vital to the growth of the data centers and the artificial intelligence business that is enabled by those chips, both on the GPU side, CPU side, and on the specific chips that ARM is both licensing and developing for themselves. And then there's distribution for all of this as well. And that goes through Stargate. Let's dig a little bit deeper in ARM, though, because I do think that this is actually quite interesting. And from the conversation that we had with ARM at Super AI, I think this gets even more interesting. So ARM is arguably one of the most strategic assets SoftBank owns because it sits inside the compute layer without, frankly, depending entirely on one model company or one application category. But that's actually key to me, right? Is that because either it's licensed IP, so Apple licenses IP from ARM to build their M chips and their A chips as well. All of those are ARM-based chips. You may or may not know that. But that's just the biggest example of this. But I mean, Snapdragon, all these other chips that sit inside mobile devices, almost all of them are ARM-related. And they're starting to get involved in the AI business as well. SoftBank tells us that more than 325 billion ARM-based chips had shipped globally by the end of 2025. Sorry, June 2025. That's almost a year ago. But just think about how many chips that is. 8 billion people on the planet. Let's say half of them have access to the internet or to technology. 325 billion. That's like 80 chips per person that has access to global technology. That's just a lot. It's just a lot of chips. Okay. And it expects ARM-based chips to represent up to 50% of new server chips adopted by leading hyperscalers. That's just a lot of chips. ARM is also moving more deeply into the AI data center stack. SoftBank says ARM announced its first ARM designed silicon chip in March 2026, aimed at cloud and agentic AI workloads, going right deep into the belly of the AI monster, right down the middle, right? Cloud and agentic AI workloads. This is the place where everybody wants to be operating. And this shifts ARM, as I mentioned earlier, further from pure IP licensing, where they just like do all the research, create all the stuff, and then somebody else takes that IP, customizes the design. This is what Apple does again with their M chips and their A chips, and then has TSMC manufacture them for them. In this new case, ARM has said not only are we designing them, but we're working with partners. I believe in this case it was Meta that they were working with, and they designed their own chips. And Meta has made a big commitment to some of these ARM chips as well. This is really important. Strategically, if AI demand, and this is a big question, right? We talked about this last night on our AGTP show. If AI demand keeps moving toward more efficient, specialized, high volume compute, ARM becomes like one of the most important operating cores of SoftBank's AI thesis. Let's do a little bit more. What does the OpenAI and Stargate exposure tell us about the financial risk? Well, SoftBank's OpenAI bet gives it exposure to one of the most important model companies in the world. But, my skepticism around how important these model companies are going to be as revenue generators going forward is well known. Okay. But it also, in this case, concentrates the balance sheet around a private, very, very capital intensive company whose infrastructure needs are enormous. We've mentioned this before. SoftBank has committed up to $32 billion to OpenAI, while Stargate has laid out a plan for $500 billion over the next 4 years, excuse me. And this leverage here is not some theoretical thing that they talk about. Reuters has reported that SoftBank, again, has secured a $40 billion bridge loan in March 2026 to fund further OpenAI investment in corporate needs. The other thing that's interesting to me is, where does Intel fit into this? So if I look into this, things start to get actually pretty interesting. SoftBank's $2 billion investment into Intel is not just a financial investment into, like, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but less relevant than it used to be, chip manufacturer. It's a strategic option. It's almost like buying a call option on a US-based semiconductor capacity and potential future supply alignment for AI infrastructure. Intel has clearly struggled against NVIDIA in AI chips and TSMC in manufacturing. But that's exactly why this bet is interesting and fits into what Masayoshi Son actually normally does. Buying something that other people don't understand the value of, or where he thinks it's massively undervalued by the market, and then just making it more valuable. And noticing this actually before anybody else notices as well. This is actually super important for him too. If the US needs more domestic semiconductor capacity, I don't want to talk about geopolitics so much, but like if it does, for whatever reason, Intel is going to become a strategically important asset even before it becomes competitively dominant again. And for SoftBank, Intel does not need to be the whole answer. We've talked about this. They want to build a full stack, almost like an AI conglomerate. And, Intel can just be a help to them, not really a hindrance to them. They can't lose a ton of money on this. And again, we've already seen situations where SoftBank has invested tons of money into WeWork and wrote down a $9 billion valuation to zero. Frankly, if they lose a couple of $1 billion on investing in Intel, I don't think anybody's going to care. And I definitely don't think that Masayoshi Son is going to lose any sleep over this at all. Okay. Before we get to today's guests, let's do a quick message from our second sponsor, Boomi. Yes, before we get to our today's guest, let's have a quick message from our second sponsor, Boomi. How you doing, Martin? Let's do it. Boomi is the data activation company for artificial intelligence, very relevant for what we're talking about today. It powers the agentic enterprise by bringing data to life across your business, trusted by over 30,000 customers and supported by a network of over 800 partners. Boomi helps organizations of all sizes achieve agility, efficiency, and innovation at scale. Let us welcome our first guest today, Martin James Cook. That's okay. Should I keep talking about SoftBank? Okay. Let me tell everybody, I talked a little bit about SoftBank's investment, their first big investment in Alibaba. But let me just confirm something for everybody, because I think that SoftBank actually made an investment slightly earlier. And I think this was actually their original investment into the internet. Yeah. So in the early 90s, SoftBank was in the United States and Yahoo was actually trying to raise money. I've told this story before, but I do think it's really indicative of the way Masayoshi Son invests and thinks about things. Okay. Yahoo was out pitching for a $10 million investment. And Masayoshi Son, who did not at the time, actually in the early 90s, have big investments in the internet, was like, okay, I see where this thing's going. I want two things. One is I want to invest $100 million in you guys for whatever, I don't care, like whatever percentage of the company I want to get. And then I want to have the Yahoo franchise in Japan. You can't tell me what to do with it. I'll use all your branding. I'll make it look like it's Yahoo Japan. But I don't want your branding. I mean, I want your branding, but you guys don't have to run it. We'll take care of it, and we'll pay you some sort of fees or whatever it is to do that. Literally everybody thought the dude was crazy. And I do believe this predates Alibaba. But the point is that he turned that $100 million that everybody thought was insane into like 40-something billion dollars. That alone helped save SoftBank for the first time that it needed to be saved. But you just have to understand, like, remember I said earlier when we were doing the original segment about SoftBank and talked about how they were trying to build this AI infrastructure stack. And I said, Masayoshi Son does already got enough money to live whatever kind of life he leads. But what he does about is doing interesting things and building something that has a legacy. Yahoo Japan is still there. And it's still one of the biggest internet properties in Japan. And it has been since literally like the early days of the internet in Japan. Okay. But the point is that he never really cared about how much money he was going to make. He wanted to give them enough money to facilitate and help them build a moat around their Yahoo business in America. And I would presume to guess that peak Yahoo was the internet. It really was. Go back and ask some of your friends that are like a generation older than you, do they have a Yahoo email address? The answer would be yes. Do they look at Yahoo Sports? The answer is going to be yes. Look at Yahoo Finance today. The answer is probably still yes. So that bet that he made for $100 million that turned into 35 or $40 billion is just indicative of the way he likes to invest. You can look at this, and I don't even know how old he is now. Let's take a look. So he's what, 68 years old? Yeah. That must be James. How are you?
Extremely well, thanks, Michael. How are you? I'm intrigued to know who's 50, whatever it is, 60 odd years old.
Masayoshi Son. I am doing well. You know him, right? He's the founder of SoftBank, yeah? Me okay? Good? Super duper. Obviously, because we wanted to talk about how digital trust infrastructure helps businesses secure identities, software, and connected devices at scale. But before we do that, tell us a little bit about DigiCert and the important work that DigiCert does.
Sure. No, thanks for the opportunity to do that. Well, it's great to see you, and appreciate you having me on. So, DigiCert, very briefly, we're a global leader in digital trust. We've got over 100,000 customers worldwide, including over 90% of the Fortune 500. And in summary, we enable trust across a variety of platforms. So whether it be that infrastructure, devices, software, content, and AI. And it's all based on our DC1, PKI, and DNS platform. So that's us in a nutshell.
People to businesses.
Yeah, so I think digital trust is an interesting and it's a conversation that's clearly expanding all the time, and I guess that's something we can get into. But there are a number of key areas I think that we address in that space. But in our terms, it's really simple. It's the ability to fundamentally be able to for various parties to be able to implicitly trust each other in a number of different areas in a number of different formats.
Got it. And where does the platform come into play here, right? You talked about DNS and some other stuff. Like, where does all that come into play, and how do people work? How do people use it, and how does it work for them?
Yeah, so the platform is something that we've been developing for some time. Most people will probably know DigiCert as the world's leading TLS SSL provider, and we're very proud of that heritage. But our capabilities have expanded significantly for them, because there are a number of interrelated parts to PKI, and typically now we're finding that customers want to integrate those things together. And as a consequence, what we've done is we've built the DC1 platform, which gives the ability to integrate the trust for all those different things, say devices, software, content, etc., and do that all under a common platform with a standard approach, standard user interface. So that's kind of how we approach it.
I'm smiling because I know that I did this when I was working at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. Like, the nomenclature and the lingo that we used every day at work just kind of filtered into the rest of our lives. Maybe you can tell people what PKI means, public key infrastructure, and why it matters as well, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, and and it's a really good point, actually, Michael. When we kind of live this every single day, we just go through it. So as you say, public key infrastructure. Essentially, it's a set of products and a set of processes based around encryption and digital certificates that just fundamentally, as I said before, allows parties to be able to implicitly trust each other. And it's an interesting one, Michael. It's one of those things that, in fact, I often think of it as being like a utility, because, like water or electricity. It's one of those things that kind of sits there under the covers. People don't really think about it. But when it's not there or something goes wrong with it, then you realize how foundational it is to many of the things that in cybersecurity we take for granted.
Yeah, like, it's weird. The stuff that we do take for granted, when it's working, nobody cares. Nobody even knows it's there. But when it stops working, it's a nightmare.
100%. 100%. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Can I ask you this? Like, I feel like I'm old enough to remember when every single device we had wasn't connected.
Yeah.
If that's fair. But now, as more and more businesses, even small businesses, use APIs, some people are in the cloud or have hybrid stuff. Like, everybody's got some kind of mobile app or is involved in some kind of mobile app. And as I said, everything is connected. Are there some kind of gaps or trust gaps out there that people are missing inside of, whether it's a large enterprise or a medium-sized enterprise, that we need to discuss?
Yeah, I think so, and I think, and by the way, you're absolutely right. The landscape has changed hugely, with regard, particularly to connected devices. So, by many estimates, there's now 50 times as many connected devices as there are connected people. So the landscape and the nature of the challenge has significantly changed. But you're absolutely right. There are now a number of challenges that we just haven't seen historically. In fact, again, I was having a conversation with a number of customers that we had in an event in Delhi in India recently, and we were saying that right now is probably the biggest period of change that we've seen. Most of us had a bit of grey hair, or in my case, no hair. So we'd all been around for a little while, and we all had seen things come and go, but we kind of changed that we've seen in our space. So is obviously top of mind for most people. PQC is another thing that's happening, but even some more fundamental things that really affect PKI, like the reduction in life cycles for public facing. These are huge challenges, and then you add into that the huge connected device, and the challenge is we're in interesting times, but we're definitely in very challenging.
But what are the implications of artificial intelligence and even agentic AI in the context of PKI, and just all? And I remember who said, okay, I will buy a CD. I'll buy one right now if you tell me it's the last thing you're going to invent in the music space, because I'm tired of buying like the next new device. Do you know what I mean? Because I've replaced first I had in the technology where it's like, it wasn't bad enough. We had to this, are we on-prem or off-prem cloud? It wasn't bad enough. We had to just, how do we organize our data? Is it a data lake? Is it structured data? Is it unstructured data? All this kind of stuff. But I feel like AI is blowing all of this up incredibly so fast. Like the cloud was not much change in your cloud implementation scale. What is the implication of just the speed with which all this stuff is moving in the context of the business that you're running?
Yeah, it's a question. By the way, you're talking to a guy that's on board here. I think it was me and one other guy. I think that's excellent stuff. Yeah, and by the way, it is interesting. Again, one of the conversations I was also having is how different AI is to some of the changes that we've previously seen. So you know, I'm old enough to remember the advent of the internet as being comparable in terms of tectonic in IT and in the lives of most people. Only adopted, finding genuine enterprise use cases for it took a little bit of time. I think AI is completely different. It's gone from a situation where it's was non-existent to a point where it's being used by not only most of AI, whether it's something as simple as versions of ChatGPT or Claude, or you know, implementing AI agents, which are an unprecedented scale of change. And I think it's worth, before we kind of talk around some of the challenges I introduced, it's worth kind of just pausing for a second and benefits of AI. I think there's a temptation for us to think that it's a bad thing. I think if I look at how I do my job and some of the way that it can save me time and save our organization more widely, it's huge. But of course, like anything, it does come with some challenges. It's really important that we get some guardrails around. I'm happy to give you my view as to where I think some of the changes or some of the challenges are with AI, and potentially what I think some of those guardrails should look like.
So I'm curious about two things, both the things you've just mentioned, but one is character into an organizational thing, and that's a different conversation. Yeah,
100%. Well, from my point of view, so you know, one of my is to run our sales team,
right.
and the end of AI and kind of my casting, my predictive analysis in terms of whether we think opportunities are going to progress, where we see issues in those opportunities that we can help the customer with. You know, that's been revolutionized by AI. I have so much more information at my fingertips, the ability for it to improve my decision making literally in the space of 12 months. It's I look now and think, well, how did I possibly work to for customers? We need to put together business cases. It's not a case of replacing the thought process that you and I would put into those. No. It really improves that. It allows us to kind of short circuit some of the things that are very time consuming and really ultimately we do services and in terms of AI with the development. Likewise, I have no doubt doing the same thing in our accounting department, our HR department. It's just changed every business forever.
Can you talk about the challenges now as well?
I can, yeah. And there are some real challenges, and I kind of broadly put those into three categories, and I'll kind of hit the two that I think is really around. The reason I'm starting, Michael, I think it's things that most people can relate to. So I'll give you. Let me just. Probably 6 or 7 years ago, I was involved in a car accident. It was nothing serious. On a country road, I came around the corner, right side of the road, into me. Nobody injured. It was okay. I got out of the car. I took photos of the accident site, of what the damage looked like. I took pictures of the skid marks on the road to show that obviously it was on the road, braking. Right. And that was an open and shut case. I presented that evidence to the insurance company. I presented that evidence to the police. It was fact. It was considered to be absolute fact because we had photographic evidence of, I think he even took a video as well. So it was open and shut. Roll forward 5 or 6 years. Would that be considered definitive proof of anything right now? I would say probably not. Because of the ability to generate deep fakes, who knows whether what I'm sending was true or not? Has it been altered? And I think it's fun. If you saw something, you had a picture of it, you had a video of it, you had a recording of it, it was real.
Yeah.
I think that's completely changed now. I think now people are close to the point, and now they soon will be, which is I will assume something is not real. I'll assume.
Right. Yeah, it's like fake until proven real. It's just a weird thing, and it's good that you went to the trust thing first. That was the first thing I was going to ask you about. What are the other two categories you have?
So the other, and this is again, a year ago, probably something that people talked about. Now everybody's interested in this trust aspect, and that's AI. Are being used in every single, in most departments. Revolutionizing that we work and the way that we do business. But again, what we're doing, we're creating essentially autonomous beings, and that comes with a huge amount of risk. If you look at the parallels between the checks that I as a person would have to go through and the guardrails I have in place when I do my job, and we want to are acting.
But so you said trust and AI agents. I want to get to the third one, but I want to get back to AI agents in a second after you tell me what that third category of challenges are, because I think there's an interesting concept around identity here that I want you to identify.
Yeah, sure. So, and the third one I would say is AI models. So obviously, again, not only the familiar elements that we all know of, but also people are building their own. I see you smile. Most people are.
The you know and love part is the thing. The you know part, I understand. The you love part, I don't know. It's up for debate, but go ahead.
So, but also people have, there's a huge amount of kind of small scale. We can trust those solutions. So,
sure.
So those are the kind of three that I
think the way that senior management, whether it's all the way up to the C-suite, but definitely the board for sure, when they identify, like, I don't know how to say this. It's not people. It's just individuals, maybe, because there are human individuals and non-human individuals, right? HIs, which is a weird thing to call the guy who's sitting next to you is an HI, but serious. But how are we meant to think about identity in this context where some of the people around us or some of the employees around us are NHIs?
Yeah. I think you've really gone to the heart of it, Mark. You're absolutely right. For example, when I started DigiCert, there's a few things that you take for granted as a a human being.
For sure.
And that's, I'm not going to start the job unless I've definitively identified who I am. I need to produce my passport, my drive. I'm not just going to wander in and they're going to take my word for it as to who I am. So
that's Bob. He's the new guy to do what though?
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, and that leads me on to the next step, because the next thing is when I start as a person, I think, well, okay, I'm employed in the finance department, but I don't think to myself, well, actually, I'm in the finance department. I have a job description, a very clear list of the things that I'm supposed to do. But I'm bored of finance today. I think I'm going to have a go at HR.
Yes,
I think that looks like fun or marketing. You don't do that. You have a very clear list of what you can do, what you can't do. You need to stick to it.
But also what you can know and what you can see. Yeah, is that fair?
100%. Absolutely right. Those are, when we're talking about an individual, those are standard guardrails that we have in place. And I guess the final thing as a person is, if I decide that I'm in finance and my job's something reasonably low level, but I decide, I'm going to go to the markets and I'm going to raise a few $1 million off my own back. Again, the company would probably be within its rights to ask me to leave. That ability to, that kind of kill switch, that ability to remove a person or something from a situation is something you take for granted as an individual. So let's overlay that whole identity piece onto AI and an AI agent in particular, because again, remember, these agents are doing the things that in many ways they're autonomous, they're acting on their own, they're making decisions. So what you want to be able to do is have that same level of control over those AI agents. So you need the ability to be able to definitively identify that agent. You need the ability to assign it particular properties. Here's what it can do. Here's what it can't do. Here's the information that you can have access to. And then finally, if it's not doing what we want it to do, we have the ability to operate a kill switch and remove it from the situation.
Right.
You know, so we take that for granted when we're talking about humans. We also should be able to take that for granted when we're talking about AI agents as well.
So just one more thing, and again, then I'll let you go. But do you think then that an AI agent should have to go through some sort of HR style onboarding, that it should have an employee number or some definitive identification so it can be separated from another agent that may be doing similar work but has a different identity?
Yeah, yes. Passport, an AI passport for an agent is already available. So we've been providing the ability to devices for many years and secure cloud workloads for many years. The concepts are very, very similar. So with an AI, it's irrefutable. It allows you to then assign various properties to that agent that cannot be changed. Turn that agent off if you really need to. So the technology already exists. It's tried. It's overlay that onto the research currently working on.
Awesome. Okay, James, thank you so much for taking the time and doing this today. I really appreciate it. Really stuff.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Martin, let's bring in Kean Kang as well. How are you doing this morning? It's the afternoon already. Wow, it's late. How are you? It's nice to see you. It's nice to meet you. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate it. So it's great because we want to talk about how payment can help MSMEs participate more fully in the digital economy. And before we dig into the details, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the important work that Paydibs does?
Well, Paydibs is the register with the central banks, right? What we're doing here is provide an endpoint. Whether doing business over the install or selling online, we provide you an endpoint, be able to accept multiple payment channel through through one single connectivity to us only, right?
Got it. Yeah, I mean, you can talk about the payment problem that most SMEs, most merchants are actually trying to solve. Is it this idea that it's too expensive to have multiple systems, or is it just the ability to accept payments? Is it just operationally, or is it all of those things? Like, what are they trying to solve for?
Yeah, that's a very good question, right? A lot of times, right, or most of the cases that we encounter here is the merchants, they tend to look at payments as an additional cost, but instead you should look at it as a component, as a as a tools that if implement properly, the betterment of the operation than the business, right? So yeah, here is really is about that. Yeah, they people don't really look at that. Really a lot of the challenge that we're facing now.
So when does it stop being a cost? Become a sales enabler. Do you know what I mean? In other words, when does a merchant realize, okay, I do have to pay for the service of having something like Paydibs, but because I'm doing that, I can now double my sales or triple my sales, or it's just easier for my team to make sales. When does that bit switch? So it's like a cost feels like an enabler for sale.
There's only one thing need to be in place and need to be done is the merchants accept cashless payment, and how that is really up to us, the player, to do our part, right? we have to ensure the sign up and the onboarding is seamless for them, right? Without them to cracking the correct, and must be precise, right? Then the next step here about the adopting, right? When we give them, when they are operating in install roles, we should able to payments terminal to their POS easily.
Yep.
Let's say today they are selling online, or even must be a seamless, seamless without all these complicated stuff. I think that is a part that we can do, we should do, and doing.
Or what would you say the status is of digital payments in Malaysia right now? I can tell you that I almost never use cash. Like the only place I use cash is in a store where some store is trying to force me to use their own sort of unique digital payment. Right? It's not something that everybody can use, but only if you have like a specific. How would you characterize it in Malaysia right now?
So I think if I have to describe the situation now in Malaysia and what we are really seeing, right? Payment is always two sides of thing. The consumer. Now, on the consumer side, basically, I would say that all of us, we are cashless payment, right? That's a good thing, right? Everywhere we go, that's definitely, wanted to make payment using cashless over here.
Yep.
On the merchants, I think I would say majority of the businesses, they are accepting cashless one way or another too. But allow me to further detail on this part, right? By the merchants, right? That is really depends on to what extent they are already at now. Now, static QR is very common. That cashless acceptance is the best for them, the most optimal for this operation. That is a big question mark, right? So here in us, we are really, if you only want to accept now QR or the QR payment to be at least dynamic QR rather than static QR. Because static QR, think about it, static QR today, yes, it's easy to deploy. It's not, you need to keep the amount by themselves. And that gives the first layer of error, say, right? So for probably the consumer might key in phone number. Then you wouldn't be on the merchant side, they will be able to section that they can, right? For example, at the end of the days, right, they will be able to look at the long list of the transaction. But what exactly which right? Is a basic thing that we wanted to push for, and although static QR is everywhere and cashless is somewhere in Malaysia.
The static QR means that the merchant itself is not necessarily using some sort of embedded POS. They just go directly into their bank account, deposit into the bank account. There's very little. Do I have that right?
Yes, exactly. Right.
But dynamic means that they're using a system kind of like Paydibs, where it says like there's a whole bunch of word metadata around the payment, so I know not just you're paying, but I know what you're paying for, what time you're paying, why you're paying, all this kind of data that's associated with. So later, then I can analyze, categorize, synthesize all that stuff. So that's the difference really between a static and dynamic. So it's a thing for them, or is it just a complex? Do you know what I mean? Or is it a complexity thing? Because maybe think about some places just static, and I feel like why would they do that? Because make a mistake and key in the wrong number. Using a, not even a very sophisticated, but just a POS system this morning. All the things that I purchased, but they have a dynamic QR code that gives me the exact amount of money spent, and it's me spending it. Why would one go with one and not the other?
It's all come back to it's all come back to a perceptions, right? Now is simple.
Yeah.
If I can answer these questions right, someone will just need to print it out and then paste it anywhere near the store, right? Then that's it. There's no need to integrate, apply for it, or or even charge the terminal, right? Simple, right? On one end, right, consumer here or user here, we are one way or another already having a way they're used to make cashless payment. But on the business side, they are starting to see all these trending influx of customer demand coming in. But for them, that look, if the payment's done right, this is all the benefit you can get. But rather, so when all these things is not happens, right, they chose for the easiest way to adapt this cashless payment, and the easiest way here is really the static QR, that we are seeing now.
Where does modernizing the payment stack for a merchant have the most immediate impact? In other words, the ones that want it, the ones that do upgrade and modernize, what's the biggest? Because it can't just, right? We already talked about it. You get a static QR code to still get paid pretty quickly. Is it easier sales, or is it just the ability to analyze later where your sales are and then help you with product optimization or timing?
I kind of refer back to what I say earlier on, right? A lot of times payment was mistakenly looked at as an additional cost.
Yeah.
And today is right, for me, the payments now and the future, it's not so much about the acceptance anymore. It's always about what happened after the payments, right?
Yeah.
What happened after the payment. So the scenario that we wanted to create over here, or rather when modernization happens, right? The idea here should be today, yes, you will be able to accept payment. But that payments, right, it shall give you metadata that you mentioned earlier on, the wording that you used earlier on. But for us, it's it's a productive data that you will be generated. With that data generated, right, you see, we shall able to help you to know better what is the best selling item for you. Then accordingly, you will be able to plan for your inventory, right? And then it will be even able to help you to plan for your cash flow accordingly. Right?
Yeah.
You know exactly which one sell the most. You know exactly what kind of inventory that you need. You know exactly what kind of money that you need to prepare for it. Now, this is really at the payments, post-payments data usage only. So further to that, right, the modernization, it will be useful, it will be meaningful if we can embed the other financial product into it as well.
So,
for example.
so that's what I was going to ask you. Like, if you're part of the payment infrastructure, almost by definition, like maybe I used the wrong word and you were just making fun of me. I said metadata. Maybe that was the wrong thing to say.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I was guessing. But you're right. There is a lot of granular data there. And it also does play into your cash flow and understanding both your inventory management and your cash flow management as well. And cash flow for SMEs in general, but particularly for micro SMEs, it's like life and death, right? I mean, bad cash flow, even in a good business, can be bad for business. Are you building other products as well that then take that payment data, keep them on the platform, on the Paydibs platform, and say, now let us help you with your cash flow and better understand it, not just help make the payments, but build an entire ecosystem around that as well?
Yeah. So yes, indeed, we are building a specific financial product that for us is a right fit into these ecosystems, right? So again, today we are no longer talk about the acceptance, right? I think the industry is kind of matured to an extent already, as to what kind of payment method, how fast we can process a payment, all this and all that. We take it as a granted, right? Now, for us, for Paydibs now, most important thing is after the payment done, what else that we can do, right? For us, the picture that we see, the picture that we are creating now is very straightforward, and I don't think there's any magic that we are trying to create over here. It's always about how do we properly and fully utilize the data that we are having, right? And then which in return is something that optimize, something that are productive for our merchant to do. So what I'm referring to over here is now because when we onboard a merchant, we already know who they are. Now, and then accordingly, by helping them to process the payment, we already know what is the cash flow like. Accordingly, the next financial product that financial product that we can extend to them is always financing, right?
All
So
right.
the financing that we are creating now, it is really something that what we call a pre-approved financing product. This is where, so we don't really need them to submit another set of application form. We don't really need them to go through another underwriting layers again, right? Because you see, doing whatever that we're doing is quite strategic and constructive in the way that we already know who they are. And as a matter of fact, we also know how much it will be the cash flow. So
Right.
we have the details. Then for us to offer, for us to extend the financing, it should be seamless process that we should do and we can do, right? So that is something that we are going to launch it, by the next quarter itself.
So funding would require the management of a balance sheet, which could grow substantially over time if you're out there financing at scale.
Yes.
So how do you manage the balance sheet, and where does that money? Do you have to raise money to kind of build your balance sheet, or can you do that? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I think this is secrets, or not to say secret, but then there will be an advantage of us, wherever that we're doing now, right? So look at it, right? When we run, typically when we go into a lending business, what we are worrying the most will be, the collection, right?
Yeah,
I always
default, collection, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I always told my product guy that, be careful, right? When we do lending, don't get into a money collection business, right? Don't get into a money collection business, because once you give it out, if you don't plan it properly, it will turn into a money collection business only, right?
Yeah, it could end up being a nightmare for sure.
Exactly, right. Now, Paydibs, as a registered merchant acquirer here in Malaysia, right? What we are really doing, not only offering a payment channel, but then we are also in a position to, doing the settlement on behalf of the merchant, right? So basically, the settlement from the payment channel, it will come to us first, right? Then with the merchant consent for whoever that taking our loan product, we will already deduct the collection and then settle the balance to the merchant in that sense, right?
Yep.
So on that part, the collection is always optimized in that sense, right? So that's how we product this lending component at our site.
Right. But what about the financing side of it? Like, do you have to go out and raise money for that, or do you run it just out of your own cash flow, or you don't want to say?
Yeah, we wouldn't. Okay, so the things over here, right, is we are doing specifically merchant financing. We are not doing lending business. So there is a fine difference over there, because for now, whatever some payments that we gave out, right, it is really depending on how much money that merchant is processing. We wouldn't want to be in a position that offering the loan which is more than whatever that they are processing now.
For sure.
So there's always a balance over there, right? So what we're doing now is look, I kind of know how much you will process in a monthly basis. So now kind of allow you to access to that amount in advance. Yeah, but we are not saying that, okay, we kind of know that you process 50,000, we are going to give you 500,000, things like that. So in that sense, that's how we balance it, because we don't really intend to go into a sole lending business, but it's more on the merchant financing. Yeah,
I understand. How is AI kind of reshaping the infrastructure for the business that you're running? Not just on the payment side, but kind of like across the board. I mean, address that in any way you want, for sure. But
AI is a very hot, terms these days, right?
Yeah.
And for us, we are taking these AI components very carefully, in a very conservative way, but we ensure that it is a productive way, right?
Yep.
AI for us, is all about the data that we have about the merchant, right? About this merchant, and then what we are doing for them is let's say, for example, these merchants are selling festival-related goods. Then we will already prompt them through 2 or 3 weeks in advance. Hey, the festival coming up soon, and then we realize that it is super related to your business. You probably need to start to prepare now already, right, for your stock.
Yep.
If you do not have a stock, you do not have enough cash flow for your stock, then this is SME financing, that merchant financing that we can provide to you, right? So our AI usage, it is always surrounding on how we can generate the useful data, specific and useful data for this specific merchant, for the business betterment of it. Another example here is we will be able to tell them that, look, doing whatever that you're doing, when we compare to other businesses that are within the same category of use, right? You are not doing that well compared to them, as how we can see, right? So we will give them respectively suggestion for them to how they can do better, right? So that's how we use AI in our business here in Paydibs.
Got it. Okay. I am going to thank you, Kean Kang, for coming on and doing this today. I really appreciate your time. Lots of stuff to learn about payments in Malaysia. Thank you again for coming and doing this today. I really appreciate it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Likewise. Take care.
Thank you. Okay, Martin, let's bring Claire Mayan, the co-founder at Sign. Claire, how are you? I am super duper. Can you hear me okay? I can. You are very audible, easily audible. Martin, let's bring her into the main room as well. There you are. Okay, Claire, thank you so much again for coming and doing this today. We wanted to have you on to talk about how verifiable identity and governed execution will help regulated institutions trust AI agents. This is a big deal, particularly when those agents are acting on behalf of other people and organizations. But before we get to that, tell us a little bit about Sign.
Yeah, really happy to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to introduce.
Thank you.
So Sign is a B2G company. Our target customers are governments. We are currently in partnership with 7 different governments. And we built the digital infrastructure for them, basically on 3 fronts. The first one is ID, so basically something like citizen identity, verifiable credentials, and we also built something we call data transaction proof layer. So that is purely for auditing purpose for government, just in case you need to check when and data exchange happen between different departments.
Yep.
And on the side of ID, we also do financial infrastructure, and now we also do AI governance layer. So the same thing that we had for ID, like credentials that we built, now we build for agent as well, and the data transaction proof layer that we had before, now we also apply it to agent communication.
Got it. Was there a third one, or did I hear all 3 of them?
We did all 3 of them.
Got it. Okay. So can we talk a little bit more about AI governance? Why is this so important, and how does it get implemented, particularly on the agentic side?
Yeah, of course. So we see the shift of AI, right? Before, I remember my dad, he's even using like chatbot to check on like facts.
Even your dad?
Yeah, my dad, my grandma even. She asked.
Grandma, I understand. The dad thing, I don't know, hits a little bit too close to home. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So before, if the AI gives you an answer, even if it's wrong, and you can like decide whether or not you want to act upon it, right?
Right.
Now we see that in our company, our developers are all using AI to like write code to help with them with production level stuff. Different governments, we see that even like governments, they are trying to include AI into government decision making and the law making, doing AI as part of the public sector performance. And now we're not just talking about answers. People like AI agents are acting on behalf of either its citizens or government. So what we think from science perspective is auditing and governance will be far, because the actions sometimes it's irreversible, right? And if it's a government level decision, then something real, that last check or even hold of whoever give the go to the agents, then that person agent's action.
Right. And how what's the right word? How open idea that actually implements or controls that agent, the ones that are actually supposed to be responsible and accountable for the actions that that agent take?
Okay, so I think that's more of a debate including into lawmaking process for like reviewing and simulating the impact of laws. Now I think recently they have AI join the cabinets, and they even have the agency for AI and sovereign data.
Yeah.
Oh, can you hear me?
Martin, we lost Claire's audio. And it just went out like mid-conversation. She's clearly very happy about the thing she's saying, though, and that makes me excited to hear more of it.
Can you hear me?
But it's interesting.
No.
Lost your audio. It looks like, oh, you want me to just come back in the room? Back in the room. I can. Can you hear me? Just give us one more second, Claire. Okay. Stupid. Okay, Martin. Still. Did you expect it to get lost? Oh no. That's okay. We're almost there. Can you see me as well? Great. Okay, just give us one more second. We need to bring you into the main room. A roll too. It's always a good thing to have a guest on a roll. Head. Right. For sure. So why digital identity systems, if you know what I mean? Right. Oh. Do that. How do I understand when I'm interacting with them? So like if I'm Claire, right? I kind of know where you work. I don't necessarily know who your boss is, but I know you've been told about company X. I mean, but to be fair, I should probably verification regardless. Agentic AI or no agentic AI. But and I would also just somebody worked for you, was another co-founder, like how they were related to you and all these other things, right? But with an agent, an agentic AI, I know if they're verified, and that in the back end, as you said, that the auditing's been done, but it's a track to the person who's responsible. How would I know who that is? To know. Right. Ron, I lost your sound again. Hear you easily. Okay, go ahead. There you are. Keep going. Right.
tracking my tax record, then this
Their
data.
sound is gone.
Mhm. Hello.
Claire, say something.
Can you say hello?
That's a shame. Martin, do we know what's going on here? We just do. Yeah, I can hear you perfectly fine.
Okay.
Well,
Sounds good.
Claire, thank you so much, and thank you for your patience. You've been an amazing guest, and I had more stuff for you.
Yeah.
Please. Thank you. Spend a few minutes. And verifiable credentials, particularly from a government standpoint. I thought this was, I guess, the question that I was asking her just now was, the only part I understand, right? If an AI agent is out there, performing tasks, I think I would agree that it makes sense for that agent and the tasks that that agent is performing. You want to know what the agent is trying to accomplish, why they're trying to accomplish it, but more importantly, I think you want a little bit of traceability. I would suggest a lot of traceability. And the question that I was asking her and that she was addressing for me, I think at the beginning, when her sound went out, was this idea of, okay, do some background check. And if there's a human working for her, right, because she knows the relationship to her, to Claire is relatively easy for me to verify this. If nothing else, I can just give her a call and say, like, this guy on LinkedIn says that he's the head of sales for Sign. Is that actually true? Whether it's true or not. So I can do that. Easy for me to verify that. I guess one thing that I want to know is she's talked about traceability, particularly in the context of governments providing agentic discussions with maybe people that are looking for government services or anything that's in a regulated environment, is how do I know, speaking to agentic AI, that who has given them permission to speak to me and who's responsible at scale for that? Because that's the big thing here. And that is, no matter how autonomous the agents become, some human at that organization, whether it's a government industry or frankly, whether it's just a mom and pop shop down the corner, some human is going to have to take responsibility and be accountable for the actions of that agentic AI. And that to me falls into this category of traceability. And I'd love to have her back on to try to understand how this is going to be. But the other thing is, she says she works with governments. I'm presuming, although I'm not sure, that all those governments are in Asia or in Southeast Asia at some level. But there's a big there in artificial intelligence. We see this as becoming really, really important. And a lot of it is discussed in terms of like local models, local data, and national infrastructure. Be governed well. Because you want to know, as a user of government information, as a government data, you're going to want to know who's managing that data, where it actually reside. Is it actually being run in a way that is sovereign to whichever geographical which you are operating? Because it'll change the way you understand how the data is actually being used and how the model is being used as well. And I think that ends up being really important, particularly in the context of verifiable. If you want to do the verifiable identity, you also want to understand what the sovereign AI is doing in terms of the models that it's using, understand with whom, not just with whom or with what you're interacting. And for when we were speaking to James Cook, more commercial, at DigiCert and more on the digital certification. One of the things that he and I were discussing was the difference between how you would interact with an NHI, so a non-human individual, and an HI or a human individual. That gets to the crux of what, right? You want to be able to interact with a verifiably credentialed artificial intelligence AI agent. And in some cases, you want to be able to do it simply be enough human employees to, or and all at the same time, to be able to accomplish all of the services the government itself wants to accomplish. So you're going to be in a situation where that artificial intelligence and the NHI, so the non-human individuals that are actually providing services for the government, has verifiable credentials, and that's probably one of the big reasons why this is doing this, why a company like Sign is doing this. Now, the other question is, how do you design this audit trail? What exactly are you trying to understand? There are AI-driven actions and human-driven actions. You want to make sure that, again, they're not just auditable, so not just that you know what they are, but you understand the why. Right? When an AI agent is initiating an action or approving a transaction or completed some kind of regulated process internally, so not for the user, it's not for the person who's receiving the service themselves, but for the company itself, particularly in the context of something that's being done, I'd say semi-autonomously. I hate to say the word autonomous because the implication there is the agent is acting completely on its own. And I don't think there are going to be situations, we don't have employees that are completely 100% autonomous. Again, something that I said before and something that I'll probably keep saying. But the point is that we want to be able to understand what the audit trail is so that the AI actions can be explained. Because at some point, I'm interacting with the government. No matter what happens, even if it's an amazing experience, let's say something goes wrong. If I want to challenge that, if I want to challenge whatever the outcome is of that experience, I need to be able to audit it in a way that's clear and that's traceable for me. And that's actually super important. So that's something else that I think is really interesting in the context of this verifiable credential and the verifiable credentialed identity, because that's going to be like really important. The thing too is you're going to have to understand privacy. In this case, and in all cases, particularly when you're interacting with institutions, like what does that AI agent get to know about you? Right? Because if you need to know about that AI agent itself, the other question is how can we understand who that AI agent is? We talked about this a little bit before. You want to know who's responsible for it, so to understand the context of what that agent is doing and what they're thinking about what they're doing as well. We are currently waiting for, a really good friend, Natcho Angelo, the C at kuubiik, to come in. This should be a very interesting conversation. Nacho's been running kuubiik for a while now, actually, and it's out of Singapore. We've definitely spoken to each other before, but now that there's some AI stuff going on, this is some of the stuff that I want to focus on with him too. But let's just bring Natcho right in. Yeah, bring Natcho right in. Okay. It's okay. I waited for him to pop in, so. Natcho, can you hear me okay? Awesome. I can hear you too. It's like music to my ears. Let's bring you into the main room. How are you doing today, Natcho?
Excellent. Excellent. How about you?
I am doing super duper. Look, we wanted to have you here, obviously, because we wanted to understand how AI-enabled outsourcing platforms like kuubiik are helping businesses scale execution without scaling complexity. And maybe just for our viewers and our listeners that don't know, why don't you tell them a little bit about kuubiik, please?
Yeah, of course. So at kuubiik, we are offering global solutions for basically accessing remote talent based on the specific projects that businesses might have. So whether you are a business that needs that is looking for someone remotely, but you don't have the business entity in that country, then we handle everything compliance, recruitment, and HR for you. If you need something more project based, we can also handle that part as well. So yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell what we do.
Awesome. So you sit kind of at this intersection of outsourcing agency services and kind of remote work and remote execution, if that's clear to me.
Yeah.
There are some very big and very well-funded companies out there that do this. They build entities for you in domiciles and in geographical locations where maybe it's harder for a company to build it itself, and maybe too expensive. So I'm presuming you're doing that as well. But overall, like, what problem in the traditional services model did you think need to be rebuilt, or which problems in the traditional services model did you think that needed to be rebuilt, particularly as you've been at this for a while, right? So maybe the first thing you wanted to do wasn't the thing that the overall thing that you're doing today, but what are those problems that you're trying to solve for these big companies or small companies that you work with today?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, just to maybe address the first part of your question about those big companies that are doing those kind of things already. They are very much so focusing on the compliance side. They started on that from that end.
Yep.
They obviously are doing all of that really well. And for us, it's slightly different. We don't come in from the compliance side. We come in from the recruitment side, understanding who needs to work with you and where should these people, this team where they should be from. And I think then we merge the compliance at the end of the cycle. So that means like we find the person first, and then we make sure that they're once they're onboarded, everything is compliant and you're in safe hands. So the angle is slightly different. So we're coming in more from understanding what your needs are and finding that resource for you, and then we execute the compliance side. But I would say most businesses, at least from what we've seen, is that they, first of all, they're not sure how this thing work. They're not sure where to start when it comes to hiring someone like overseas. There are so many options, so they need actually a lot of guidance. They need they are asking usually questions. If this happens, what if that happens? How is it secure for us? Actually, the market is still very new to global hiring. And that's where we come in, basically. And I think that's one of the main things that we tackle when it comes to like outsourcing. Yeah.
And how does it work? Do you go out and try to find a bunch of people that want to participate in projects? Requests come in, you're like, that's fine, we already have Lisa, she's perfectly capable of doing this? Or is it some kind of combination of that, and just companies will come to you and go, we need someone to help us on this project, and you go find that person for us? And regardless of that, what is the mechanism that you use for going out and finding these people that are appropriate for the right project?
Yeah, that's a very good question. There are multiple ways. The most standard way would be basically to look into our current database at thousands and thousands of applicants applying to our jobs in the past like several years. So we already have like a very interesting pool of talents and candidates that we can actually reach out to and see if it's a right match. But of course, sometimes the requirements are very niche or maybe like are specific. And in that case, then we would post a job and then we would get like candidates. Luckily, I guess we have a great way of acquiring new candidates. We have a lot of applicants and great applicants. And so then we of course need to go through that process, the old school process, I would call it, of like screening, sourcing, and all these things. But I think nowadays with AI and internally we've developed like a few internal tools using AI that allows us to actually scope much faster in the span of like a second talents. I say like AI takes away about 80% of the repetitive work that used to be done in terms of like screening, sourcing, things. It does a really good job, to be honest with you. I've been doing like comparisons between our team AI and not necessarily who goes fast, because I guess that's an obvious, but in terms of the quality, mainly the output. But the important part in all this is that there's still very strong, like 20-30% of what we need from an actual person to do, like anything related to the judgment, the relationship,
Right.
that calls that matter actually. Yeah.
So this is kind of a controversial question, I think. And it just popped into my head as you were talking because you mentioned agentic AI. Should there be like a new department at kuubiik that just builds agents that understands specific tasks, and then you can do one of two or maybe one of three things with them? If let's say someone just calls you and says, because you spoke about this, you're right, like someone just did tasks.
Yeah.
And then maybe if they need more tasks, you can like bundle two agents together. Understand like how that's supposed to work. You can test it internally. You can test it on some of your, most favorite clients, and then agents specifically so that, do you know what I mean? And then you can just sell those agents to people, and now you can scale in a way that's infinite as opposed to scale at human scale.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess this is what's exciting about it. At the same time, maybe scary about it as well. But
it's a little bit of both, for sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. But it's amazing how much of our world can be actually automated now, if you think about it. And outsourcing is very good at outsourcing or recruitment in general is a very good example of that. Because there's so much repetitive operational steps in outsourcing and recruitment. Like when you mentioned it earlier, we talked a few years ago, and when you come in and you say like, okay, I'm looking for ABC person. What we need to do is just find the right talent. We need to go into our database, like I mentioned earlier. We need to browse. We need to then, once we find a person, we need to send them like interview invites. We need to follow up. Then comes in, like, let's say you are ready to onboard that person. Then we need to do the whole onboarding, the contracts, the quality checks, the background checks, the report, the invoice. All these tasks are all admin tasks actually, and those tasks can be automated. So it's not necessarily a question of will AI replace quality or replace us, but it's a question of, can AI improve the workflow? Can AI fast track, let's say, onboardings? Because that's usually something that takes time and a lot of effort. So it's not just about being faster. It's also it's also about being better in terms of like, processes and things like that.
But so are there specific places where kuubiik itself is actually using agentic AI internally for specific, particularly in the recruitment side, where just to do like the first analysis? We've spoken to a bunch of people in HR tech around what they're doing. So some of them have actually built agents internally to do interviews, to do resume scan, like a whole bunch of different stuff. Where are you using it specifically internally?
Yeah, so we have pre-screening AI interviews. So it's not the full interview, but it's kind of like a pre-screening interview that allows us to capture a lot of information. There we get a score, and that score usually is a very good indicator of like the quality of the talent. Actually, not necessarily the quality of the talent, but how well they match with what we're looking for. So you could be like extremely good as a candidate, but maybe you don't match specifically for that role. And AI is very good at detecting all these things. So that's how we've been using it. And then there are some other things, like, let's say, how whenever someone uploads a resume, we have that is parsing the resume and looking at the structure of it, looking at maybe experience gaps. Like maybe you've worked 7 years somewhere, and then all of a sudden you have a gap of like 6 months or 2 years.
Right.
That maybe
I was traveling. Don't hold it against me, man. I was traveling. Oh, you're not talking about me. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and those things can happen, obviously.
Yeah.
And this is where AI can actually like flag and say like, hey, there's like a little gap. Maybe you want to ask about it. And this is why we actually call it a pre-screening AI interview. So it's not the actual interview. There's still a human touch. You'll still like interview the person, but it just allows us to do a very good filtering. Yeah.
So how do you think about the balance here between, because at some point, and I don't know if we're close to that point or not, but artificial intelligence stuff is getting more and more capable every single day. I don't know which models you're using, and to be fair, I don't really care, because I think they're very similar. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Well, I think it's a combination of many different models. I guess depending on the task at hand, we would use maybe a little bit more of Gemini. Some are more Claude. Some are more like OpenAI, basically.
Yeah.
So it really depends on the complexity of the task, and how in depth do we want to go in the analysis and so on.
Right.
So it's really a combination. There's not a single one that kind of like necessarily stands out more than another, because they're all combined for different type of tasks. But one thing that is quite interesting with all these like models that are coming out every 3-4 months, there's like a new one, and all of a sudden there's like a leader and then a new leader. But at the end of the day, it's they're a catch-up game. And if you look at it from like, let's say you step and you look at it from a top level view, you would see like they're kind of like all pretty much the same in a way, good or bad. But at the end of the day, it feels like the models will slowly how to say, will slowly become, in terms of like
they're
their
just going to
capabilities
converge and become commodities. Yeah.
Exactly. And what's going to stay out of that is like your capacity as an individual, as a business owner, perhaps, on how well you use those models actually. So it's at the end of the day, it's still in our hands, in the human hands.
Do you think about using some of the open source models out of China because the cost of using them is lower?
I mean, they are pretty good. We've looked at them as well. I guess there's no real necessary preference, or like, like we want to work with them. It's just that I feel like, I mean, Gemini, Claude, and OpenAI have a very strong structure, so it's easier especially if you're planning for the long term, to build around those platforms. Whereas the Chinese models, you could sometimes they're being I don't know, kind of like I don't know, they could be maybe a little bit more unstable in terms of how long are they going to run for. So we go for something that is maybe more solid, especially we're building something for a longer term. So yeah.
And what about the token costs? Are you concerned about that at all for a company your size, or?
Well, it's obviously an important question. But I mean, the tendency is that it's getting cheaper and cheaper. Like I said, there's a current hype around every new model that comes out, and as I mentioned, and you mentioned as well, at some point it's going to become like more of a commodity.
I think so, yeah.
It's going to stabilize, and so at the end of the day, it's not so much of a concern. It's just interesting to see like how like the model that was chosen for the for AI in general, like that is like a tokenized model, which is quite new in the market. Everything used to be like either subscriptions or like fixed prices, but so that changed the game on how or pricing their models and out there. So but yeah, I'm not too concerned about pricing, in the sense where it's been like what, 2-3 years where it's been quite stable and keeps going down. So it's interesting for new businesses. I think it's a very good opportunity as well.
How much time do you spend looking at talent management, particularly for companies that have not traditionally gone out and hired people that aren't in the same building that they're in, if you know what I mean, right? In other words, for some companies, it's just standard operating practice. We'll hire people anywhere in the world. But some companies are just kind of dipping their toe into it, and then dipping their toe into regions where maybe they have not operated before. How much time do you work with them on, here's the best way to manage people in the Philippines versus here's the best way to manage people in Vietnam?
That's a very good question. I think that's tied to like working cultures, and so we cater to a lot of businesses in US, UK, Singapore, Australia, and their talents will be either South America, Southeast Asia. You have a bit of like South Africa, North in like Eastern Europe as well, and all these regions have different working styles and working cultures. So when we onboard a new talent, when we onboard a new client as well, we have a team that does the onboarding with the client, who also like talk to them about, what is the best practice. We also tell them like, hey, there are some expectations that you guys have to understand, that it's a different culture, so maybe the working pace is different. Maybe when they say this, it means something else. So that's for sure something that is sometimes challenging, or actually sometimes you could turn into an opportunity as well, because like maybe the working style works or fits really well with the client. So that really depends, but it's definitely something that we have to we're trying to educate our clients about when we onboard them as much as possible.
Okay, Natcho, thank you so much for coming and doing this today. I really appreciate your time. It was great again to talk to you face to face, and hopefully this is not the last time you and I talk. But thank you again for doing this.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Okay, Martin, let us bring in John Gregory, the founder at Build World. John, how are you? Very nice to meet you as well. You can hear me okay, yeah?
Got you, fine. Thanks.
Awesome. So thank you again for coming to the show and for doing this today. We really appreciate you making the time to do it. We wanted to have you on because we wanted to talk about how AI native construction platforms will help builders run projects with more visibility, less waste, and better operational control. And before we get into the details, a little bit more about Build World.
World, as the name suggests, we have ambitions to build the world. Yeah, we might. So Build World is a concept and a company that I've been thinking about for a very long time, which is, at the dawn of AI, finally able to be realized. So very excited about that. As a company, I got together with a venture studio in Singapore called Liminal about a year ago, and we started on the project proper at the beginning of the year, with me as a founder in residence, working with Liminal to bring Build World to the world.
To life. So I like the way you've kind of framed this. At the dawn of AI, you've been thinking about building this for the longest time. What is the vision that you had, and what was the technological breakthrough that actually you saw and you're like, okay, now I can do this thing that I've always wanted to do? And were you always operating in the construction and in the building space?
Not at all. I've been an entrepreneur in this is my fourth industry now, over a career of 30 years. So no, not always in construction. Wow. I guess further back, my family certainly has been. My grandfather was a builder.
Got it.
My father works in the building industry. My brother does. So it's sort of in the blood, although this is my first wrestling with the industry proper myself.
Now that you've joined it, does your dad and your grandfather and your brother like give you slack for it? They're like, see, you thought it was easy, but look at how hard it is, kind of thing?
There's a bit of that, yeah. There's a bit of like, what are you doing? Just.
But what was the vision?
Yeah, there is.
You mentioned you've been thinking about this for a while. What was the vision that you saw and you were like, okay, now I have to do this thing?
I think this overwhelming feeling when you move into a structure and when you go past a house, when you're in a building, is that what this is made out of is materials, generally fairly low cost materials, and somehow between the cost of the materials and the cost of that final structure of that home, there is a disconnect between how much those materials cost to make and produce, and then the output that you get, which might be a home or an apartment. Yeah. So somewhere between the cost of the materials and the cost of the final product. There's a lot of inefficiency, and it's very complicated. The construction vertical is like a Rube Goldberg machine of relationships and complexities and participants, and all of that adds time, adds cost, and adds complexity, and results in a product that just takes a long time to make, is expensive to make, and is perhaps not as high quality as it could be. So technology does what technology always does when it hits an industry, is it makes things cheaper, better, faster.
Right.
You know, historically very poor technological
We
uptake.
lost his video. Go ahead.
Yeah, so historically construction has very poor technological uptake, and I feel like with the advent of AI, we now have this opportunity to bring the construction industry yelling and screaming into the 21st century.
Give me 1 second. Martin, we lost John's video in the main room. Yeah? Okay. John, you can still hear me, yeah? Yep, just stay with me for a second. No worries. So this is not, I don't know if everyone's going to be able to hear this, but you should know that I actually bought some land and, okay, you're back now. Now you're gone. I actually bought some land and went through the entire process of like designing and building a house in Tokyo. So not near, yeah. So not
That would have been
nearly.
fun.
Oh my God, it was literally like some of the most fun I've ever had in my whole life. Martin, he's back now.
Okay, great.
But it was, but the process, you're right, was very complex. And I think you're right. This idea that like the material cost between like what the actual materials cost to build the house and the amount of money that actually got paid to, you know, to receive the house were like night and day. And I'm curious if technology is available to make that those two things actually closer to each other, or to remove some of the inefficiencies in there, and then what that ends up looking like from a project management standpoint.
Sure, I think Elon Musk calls that the idiot index. You know, when there's a big difference between the cost of materials and the final cost of a product.
Right.
You know, Elon calls it the idiot index. Like, that's a bit harsh, because I don't think that's really the case, that everyone involved in the construction industry are idiots.
No, but I would say though that anybody that bought the stock of SpaceX was probably an idiot. But that's just my own personal opinion. But sorry, go ahead.
Depends when they bought it.
This is true. I just mean after it went IPO. Sorry, excuse me. I should have been more specific.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the advent of AI allows like a complete rethink of how a structure gets put together, from design to sourcing to fabrication of parts to assembly, in a way that it just has not been possible before. So you could imagine a future world where robots design a structure, robots manufacture that structure,
Interesting.
The components of that structure, robots ship that structure, and then robots assemble that structure. I mean, you can imagine that future state, and you can imagine that future state of the world producing very high quality structures at a cost approaching the cost of those materials. And I think that's a future state of the world that BuildWorld is just intent on bringing to being.
What do you think the impact is, though, on the entire value chain, in the sense that you've mentioned like 3 or 4, maybe 4 or 5 actually parts of the value chain, right? The design. So first of all, whether architectural design or just structural design, then the manufacture of the goods that actually go into building it, then the building it of itself, and then sort of the management of it. So it's like 3 or 4. How does BuildWorld use technology to control every one of those pieces in the value chain? Because the suggestion is that there's going to be this sort of vertically integrated, driven by technology, at the design stage, but also at the construction stage using robotics. How do you control that entire stack, and what do you think it takes to get us to there? Because it's an interesting model, yeah.
You just get out of bed and you start working on it, and you stop when it's working.
Yeah, of course. But like, how much time do you think we have until we get there? And again, I'll tell you, it took probably 6 or 7 months to build my house. It was built by one of the best construction companies in Japan, and it was designed by like a world-renowned architect who had to do some pretty serious math to get around some of the restrictions that Tokyo or Japan actually puts in the way houses get built. But I wouldn't call it vertically integrated. I'm just curious, right? Because to do all these things, you're going to have this vertically integrated ecosystem. And at some level, the robotics seem like the furthest thing away to me from this vision. What do you think?
I think it's much closer than you might suspect.
Got it. Keep going.
Let's just take each step of it, as you mentioned. Let's take the front end design.
Yep.
Let's take front end design. BuildWhat has its own application that automatically plugs into off-the-shelf design front ends now. It's agentic, and you can ask that thing to design as much or as little of that structure as you want. So what was potentially weeks or months of front-end design work that goes into building a structure can now be built essentially or co-built with robots, with that software doing the work that you ask it to do. So that's point one. Like, robotic software is already getting to work and making the front-end design faster and better.
Yeah, I can definitely see that happening, right? Because design itself is just understanding structural engineering, but also understanding the mathematics around like what spaces actually look like and what they should feel like. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that particularly Claude, that's the model that I use most. One of the things that Claude's really good at is structural engineering. Like, that guy he's amazing at it. As well as everything else.
I like that.
Yeah. I guess I mean, he's a he to me.
I like
so that. He's amazing at that. He's amazing at structural engineering in a way that a lot of humans don't do structural engineering. We'll engineer a beam. He'll measure the deflection. He'll size that beam from first principles in a way that, like, a human engineer often doesn't do anymore. A human engineer will often just plug that into a piece of software that resolves a beam for him, for example. So that's interesting, I think. And the current ability of models, they tend to be not very good at spatial reasoning and understanding spaces and how spaces need to work together, but they're getting very, very better at that very quickly. So we could take this view that AI is actually probably going to solve that whole front end, and if not now, it's already starting to, and if not now, it's months, it's not years or decades away. Then if you go further downstream to making the components that go into a structure, I've been visiting factories this week, which are entirely built by robots, which are entirely run by robots. You can barely see a person in there. Part is already done by robots, and it's mind-blowing to see. Raw materials go in one end, cabinets come out the other. Raw go in one end, windows come out the other. It's not always done that way, but you can certainly build components that way already. Automating shipping, like, I think that's already a fairly autonomous process, and that is you're just joining dots, fairly easy to do. And then assembly, you might say, yeah, that's like years away. And I think at that point, it depends what you're envisaging by assembly being done by robots. I mean, if you're imagining, if you're imagining like a bunch of Optimus robots walking around with bricks and laying bricks, and I don't think that's
No.
And anytime coming anytime soon.
But I don't think anybody wants that.
But I
either,
think,
to be fair, because let's be honest about this. And I say this a lot, so this is not the first time I'll be saying it, but I don't think humans were designed at any level to be optimized for that type of work. I think if you want to build a robot to do construction, it doesn't have to be humanoid per se. It can be very specifically and customized, do specific tasks on a construction site. I mean, to be fair, like a crane at some level is robotic. Humans were not meant to be lifting things up 3 flights of stairs, but a crane can do it pretty easily. And now you have to just add in the ability for that crane then to like screw in some screws or hammer in some, whatever that is. But a human doesn't have to do that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is the future of an autonomous construction site, is autonomous cranes with the ability to lift heavy items. Maybe we have a crew that are bolting beams together and lifting panels into place, but just a small crew doing the things that robots are just not particularly good at doing just yet. And I think that's it. Like before you know it, we are end-to-end autonomous. And this is not science fiction 20 years in the future. This is like now.
So where does most of the financial leakage come from, right? This idea that the difference between the price of the goods made and the prices of the goods sold is kind of wide. That gap is kind of wide. Where's most of the financial leakage come from? Or is it just a spread at every point of the process that gets attached to it? And what happens?
I think that's it.
It's
death by 1,000 cuts.
Is it? But what happens?
Yeah. So for example,
go ahead.
For example, like, there's an awful lot of, just take one small example. There's a lot of double handling that goes on between front-end design at a Western design architecture company, and then all of that work often having to get replicated so that the manufacturer of those components or those assemblies can then make that stuff. Yeah. So that's one tiny example of like, I'm going to do all these drawings, then I send the drawings off to someone else. Someone else has to redo those drawings in another piece of software so that then those products can be made. That's just one small example. And another very common way that margin enters or leaks out of the system is a manufacturer will make for example, a piece of manufactured stuff that will get imported to a country by a distributor. That distributor will sell to agents. That agents will sell to builders, and the builder will then also put their own margin on top of that material. So by the time a single material goes into a structure, it might have 4 or 5 hands in that pot, make not just a little bit more expensive, but often many times as expensive as it is to produce.
So going forward, if the industry looks like the way you're suggesting it's going to look, and maybe you can tell as well, where in the value chain does the money get made? Going forward, I think, right? Because right now you're right. It's like if I understand what you're saying, it's death by 1,000 cuts, which means that everybody's taking a little bit of a vig, like at every kind of movement across the value chain. But I feel like the value chain, again, according to what you're saying, is going to get way more streamlined. Maybe instead of 25 people involved, and I'm just making up numbers, right? There'll be 4 or 5 involved. Yeah. But then where does, if the design, right? Because right now hiring an architect is expensive. Building a house can be expensive. The licensing and stuff like that, not that expensive. But hiring a structural engineer, so we hired a RUP to do our structural engineering. That wasn't cheap either. Where does the value fall out? As you know, but like, where does the value fall out of the value chain? Who's going to make any money on this?
Yeah, I think the great news about that is value ultimately in these when technology hits a supply chain or a vertical. Yeah. Ultimately, the value accrues to the consumer. In the long run, the value accrues to the consumer. So what that means is homes that are higher quality arrive much faster and are more spacious and are way more affordable. And I think when we finally see like what AI can do for a building,
Right.
the world is going to be shocked at how affordable that home is. Like we're talking, beautiful architecturally designed homes at the cost of what you might spend as your starter home. I mean, this
Really?
is the AI and the age of abundance that we have all been. Is value finally accrues at the consumer's end with much better, much more affordable products. Now, I think in that supply chain, as you said, there'll be a lot less people involved, and ultimately they'll make a normal profit on their participation in that supply chain, the normal profit on capital. The orchestrator, like BuildWorld, a normal return on capital. And the end result is consumers ultimately win. Now, between the current state and the end state, there's a lot to me just sorting that whole supply chain out.
Yeah, fair enough. That's going to take a
Build
while. I think that's
BuildWorld's pretty keen to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So much for coming on today. Hopefully you enjoyed this as much as we did. Thank you again for doing it, man.
Yeah. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you. Okay, Martin, let's bring in our last guest of the day. Good afternoon. How are you doing today? Can you hear me okay? Good afternoon. Can you help me? How do I pronounce your first and last name properly?
It's Hanis.
How about your last name?
Harmiles.
Harmiles. Okay. Where are you from?
Well, I'm Aussie Malaysian, born in Malaysia, and now I'm in Hong Kong.
Beautiful. Okay, Hanis, thank you so much for coming and joining the show today. So at Reinvent IP, we wanted to have you on and talk about how AI native IP intelligence and trading infrastructure help businesses turn intellectual property into a more strategic, visible business asset. But before we get into the detail here, tell us a little bit more about Reinvent IP.
Sure. Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you so much for you guys for having me here. I'm really, really appreciative for being here.
It's my pleasure. And I saw you dancing in the green room. Like, what was that all about?
Well, a little bit of a dancing. Why not? Just getting prepared for this.
Getting prepared. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry. Talk a little bit about Reinvent IP.
Cool.
All right.
Cool. Thanks for that. I'm Hanis. I'm founder of Reinvent IP. So what we're building is that we're building our flagship product, which is IP Signals. IP here stands for intellectual property.
Yep.
What it is actually, it's like the first index infrastructure layer for IP AI assets, especially it's tackling in the AI content economy, like what you mentioned before, Mike. So it as S&P 500, we've used that to actually measure as a benchmark against equity, stocks, bonds. But what we do is we measure this against intellectual property that are surfacing, especially in the AI content outputs. So we provide neutral measurement layer like Moody's or even like Bloomberg Terminal, but a lot more for the insurers, law firms, as well as the enterprises like media enterprises that can license to accurately price how much they could recover from this potential, say, infringement because they are the rights holders, for instance, or how much they could have licensing opportunity. So this is where, from a total end-to-end life cycle, the lawyers comes in, as well as insurance will come in as well. Now with a new asset class of AI right? AI content is exploding like right now at 20-40 billion right now, and it's predicted to be about 140, 200 billion by 2030 from a market share angle.
Okay.
So this is what we built. Yeah.
So tell me how this works on this. So just run me through like what somebody's IP would potentially look like. You can give a generic description of what that is, and then where through this chain of value creation they would go, where the insurance companies in, where Reinvest IP comes in, like Reinvent, excuse me, IP comes in, and what happens to that IP, and how it actually gets monetized. Can you just run me through that chain so I can get a better understanding, and so that our listeners and our viewers can get a better understanding of how that works?
Sure. So let's give an example here. In 2023, there were actually only 2 or maybe less than 5 lawsuit cases that has happened between media company as well as AI research labs, LLM models.
Right.
Now,
and what were they suing for?
infringement. You're using our data in input data sets as well as in the output. So I can talk about that a bit later, like in terms of the types of lawsuits that has happened. As of 2026, there's more than 160 lawsuits cases that has happened globally, but mostly actually in Europe as well as the US, in terms of where this infringement and unauthorized or unlicensed, unauthorized usage of the company's IP. So it could be IP here. I know if everyone's here familiar, in a traditional IP context, patents, you have trademark, even industrial design. But where we come in the AI content era, it's not just on copyrights, or it's also on trademarks, but also on likeness, your brand IP. So if you think about it right now, if you've seen recently Taylor Swift, one example, because she's actually a very famous celebrity, has actually filed a global trademark for her IP in general, like which means her brands, her voice, because that's her source of income, as well as for her brand by itself. So in terms of creative companies like media studios, even the likes of brands, their IP is characters, catalogs, right? All the assets, the design language, brand, those are defining not just as a brand in a traditional IP of a trademark, but also because, as you know, AI has collapsed the cost of reproducing creative work at almost nothing now. You can generate a short film, a video, even an image within 10 seconds or 1 minute at least.
Right.
As compared to, it took some time. So where it comes in, those are the type of IPs to answer your question. Where the lawyers comes in, because if you think about this from this angle, Moody's tells a bank whether is this company or is this individual from a credit score can afford to pay your loan by looking at your risk scoring, by understanding your risk.
Right.
So, and in that instance, the funder or the lender says, yeah, okay, they have good score, we can actually lend them something. Or no, we can't even give them a credit card because we don't think, based on your profile, history, financial history, everything, would be able to pay. And of this data, that's where prediction of a potential financial element comes in. Similar, if you think about it, it applies to IP. The new question now is, where does my work actually exist? My work here is my IP. Like I mentioned just now, your brands, your characters, etc. Because these companies have IP that is valuing your worth of a company. And rather than me trying to use manual work, trying to figure out who's using my IP, I mean, in the next 2 to 3 years, it's hard to trace, as well as it's hard to price and measure. So that's why from our layer, the first model is we help you track and detect. But the second one is the second stage is we help you to measure, to know how much it's worth. What is based on your risk scoring, whether it's safe, whether it's critical, that's where enforcement could have happened, or the potential licensing opportunities could have happened between you and the licensee. So where the lawyers comes in, this is where the lawyers comes in. But with insurance, for instance, insurance comes in if you think about cybersecurity insurance, right? This has existed actually in today's market since the dot-com bubble. So from AI perspective now, a lot of the companies are actually, insurers are actually trying to disengage potential AI cover, including in the cyber, or what they do is they're looking at how they can price the potential AI liability that is exposed, especially when it involves, say, a technology company like AI companies, or even the likes of media companies. So what does it mean? Because cybersecurity insurance was also first introduced in maybe 20 years ago when dot-com bubble started, right? And now with the likes of AI coming in, IP is becoming a new type of chronology that could potentially insurers as well as reinsurer coming in to start.
What
So-
is this? What is this index that you're talking about? The indexing of risk. Like, what does that actually mean, and how does it manifest itself?
So, okay, let me take a step back and answer.
Go ahead.
What does index really mean? If you think about S&P 500, people use it as a benchmark to understand, all right, how can I potentially get a certain price based on so and so, like equity or bonds?
Okay,
right?
can I just interrupt you for a second? So the S&P 500 index is a list of 500 names of stocks, companies that are publicly traded, that do quarterly reportings, right? That have to abide by Sarbanes-Oxley, and that have well-known and understood valuations. All of them have earnings, or they have losses, or whatever it is. And there's a weighted index there, so those 500 names have a specific weighting inside that index, and through a certain calculation, people end up understanding what the full value. They're trying to get a sense for like where the economy is for the S&P 500. That's in the United States. There are indices in countries all over the world for specific stock listings there, but it's not a measurement of risk.
It's not.
It's a measurement of value. So
It
in the
is.
context that you're explaining, what is the relationship between what the index that you are building and what is it trying to measure versus what the S&P 500 is trying to measure, which is just like economic value in a group of companies that have been decided on by the index producer?
You asked a very good question, Michael. Because if you think about this, right, the chronology of S&P 500 is a lot more from valuation, mostly on public companies, right?
No, 100% on public companies, but yeah.
Right. And when you think about right now, the case of a lot of AI companies, yes, we have this whole IPOs, companies are going IPOs, etc.
Sure.
However, the amount of, besides, I'm not talking about hardware, I'm talking about, predominantly LLMs or even the likes of pure technology AI companies, right? And even media companies. There are a few of them who are actually already in public market, but also in private markets. So the index that I'm talking about is right now, all right, it's being used to benchmark against the likes of what is the potential risk that we could price it against, that you have potential risk of infringement, or out of this recovery angle, the value that you can occur is you could also have a licensing opportunity, because IP is not an intangible asset, it's intangible assets, right? And how you measure IP, especially in a balance sheet, is mostly on goodwill, because intangible assets is broad. You have knowledge capital, brand capital, even the likes of intellectual capital and stuff, like even resource capital. Those are the IP that defines mostly the worth of a company these days. But the sort of IP that will exist or currently exists, but it's not being loudly screamed, I would say, is actually this like of likeness. Because the amount of, like I said, the cost to produce this with AI is equally nothing as compared to before in terms of the mass network effect. So the risk here is, if I'm Disney, why do you think Disney is suing the likes of all these AI companies? Because just by prompting, whether it's from the input or the output, mostly they're looking at the output because that's how you can verify it. You are taking my source of income. In a typical traditional IP world, you have to license it from me. But because your model, just train it, or even like there's no licensing that has occurred, so anyone which is a third party, the likes of agencies, the likes of us, we can just prompt it. And the consequences of that, creating an evolution of maybe deepfakes, right? This is where deepfakes, frauds could have happened. But the likes of also jokes, memes, people are starting to create that as a viral marketing on all the social media. So there's a network effect that has occurred out of this, and where the index that the question that you asked is about understanding the risk of where this potentially sits from a risk capital angle, as well as the value of this potential IP that could be used to recover, as well as to license it. Because as such, it's intangible, you can't measure it. This is why, if you think about weather, right? Weather has been used as an asset to trade, even in funds like hedge funds and stuff. Why? Because you can kind of use to understand what's the price measure to this, as well as what's the potential prediction, maybe in a forecasting of what the weather could have occurred in the next 30 days or even similar to we index it first by understanding you can't trade any asset class without understanding of it. Similar to insurance or reinsurer, and similar to any funds.
So how do we measure that and how do we price it? So in other words, like I have a voice that people want to listen to. We create our own IP, like we do all this stuff. How do we measure what the risk is around our IP?
So we have our algorithm that we look into right now, mostly first on content that likes of characters, brands, even the likes of logos, trademarks. How we look into it, we look at a lot of indicators. One of them, for instance, is there any component of copyright infringement in your current assets? Because you reproduce this with AI, right? That's why we look at AI output, to be clear here. And second thing, we look at, for instance, is there any potential famous mark element that has already been copyrighted, or like Mickey, right? So these are not just based on prompting, but it's also based on distinct element. And you look at even from what potential valuation this could have occurred by looking at intangible assets balance sheet of IAS 38. So it's a methodology even being used to measure from an estimation angle what could be the worth of these IP assets in comparison with the likes of other similar IP assets when it comes to, say, voice. The third part as well, we look at, is there any likes of from a legal court case that has been reported, for instance, or even like litigation cases. Then we'll also look at potential like attribution risk, right? So let's say this is considered as yours, Michael, but someone else might use it. Maybe John has used it. So how is that common from one angle? This could also potentially be used. So at the end of the day, it's understanding the risk and a few other. How we look at from an indicator and we price it according to the goodwill of IAS 38, which is how you measure on intangible assets.
So again, just tell me how I would measure what the risk is or what the value of the IP is for my stuff or for anybody else's stuff that's creating content on their own, and then somebody else goes out and uses it without permission. Like, what is there a mathematical calculation? How does that work?
So yes, you have actually IP property.
Right.
Yes, that's why our model is B2B. We're not looking for B2C model.
No, for sure. But I mean, I'm a business as well, right? So I'm just curious, like, how that would work. If some other business tried to, scrape the voice or use all that other stuff, like, how would that work?
So long as you have filed it as your trademark or copyright and even likeness, then there's a measurement to actually stamp it from provenance angle. So the provenance here could also be C2PA. One instance is that people also identify on C2PA, but in a traditional point, you actually measure that against with the lawyers, with the law firms, or even like in a traditional manner. That something is still being in place. Right. But as you know, there are other technologies that are looking at tokenization of IP. So we have dabbled in that before, but for us, we decided to go one level down. Rather than IP tokenization, we look into the IP because I understand, because I was an ex-banker and I understood that any types of financial product, if there's no specific measurement of a asset class, there's no way you can use the asset class to trade it, even to insure, to trade, or even the likes of lending or license it. And this is why we pivot into building this and an index. Later, a lot of parties can come in and benchmark it against. So yeah,
And is this IP going to be tradable as well?
that's our vision. Yes.
But what does that actually end up being traded, and what's the how's the value of that individual thing that's going to be traded, measured, and determined, right? Again, because for a regular stock in the S&P 500, I can see what things, I can see where comparable companies trade. I can understand where the overall market is trading from a price to earnings perspective. How do I understand like what IP is worth, and why would a big company, let's say like Coca-Cola, want me trading their IP?
Given in your case or given in Coca-Cola's case? 'Cause
Coca-Cola's case.
Coca-Cola would have a different case than you.
Sure.
So Coca-Cola would be the rights holder, and obviously the IP would be worth billions of dollars, right?
Sure.
And their IP is going to be on the likes of their bottle design. The trademark is, of course, that's the high value of the IP, like Apple, for instance.
Yep.
But
Same.
also in the likes of brands, knowledge, capital, algorithms. So those are patents. From an IP standpoint, of course, patents is a high value IP, but patents is very traditional IP in a way, because it's looking at on how it can be copied, but in a much more slower, traditional way. When I say traditional way, means you're a pharmaceutical company, you produce on something or even a software algorithm, and then you realize that, hey, someone else is actually copying the same thing. So that would actually be much more slow as compared to with AI. Things can be reproduced in seconds, right?
Yeah, really
So
quickly.
something like Coca-Cola, what would be their main concern is, of course, say potentially the trademarks, potentially as well the likes of the copyrights campaign. If someone can reproduce this towards the benefit of someone else, like maybe it's like a small brand in Zimbabwe, one instance, that hasn't actually gotten the license, for instance, and they started using similar potential pattern,
Right.
and they started actually commercializing it, making money out of it, reproduce the same type of Coca-Cola but rename it to something else, right? Those are one angle. But in the likes of AI content, someone else can reuse this and probably give misinformation saying, hey guys, Coca-Cola and I are partnering together because so and so, and this person might have 50 million followers. Those are misinformation. It probably can also be considered as deepfake. And what is the repercussion for that? So it's not just about understanding who is using it, but also the derivatives angle of derivatives here from an IP derivatives. Where has it gone to? Who has actually used it? And based on these derivatives is how the tracking of the IP provenance and the IP ownership of this rights holder, in this case could be Coca-Cola, would understand that. And another thing I want to mention here, since I'm on this podcast with you, Michael,
You're
is
on a
about
roll.
EU AI Act. Have you heard of that?
No, what is EUAIX?
Yeah, so EU AI Act is going to be fully enforced by European Union, especially in August this year, 2026. They have started release this probably like two in last year, but gradually they're doing it steadily in terms of what is the article enforcement you're doing it. So why I mention it, because by August this year, the disclosure is about labeling. So how they are tackling the likes of infringement, deepfakes, and all this misinformation on the internet, they're asking not just the likes of AI companies, like LLM companies, but also third party who are using AI as a tool. That means you have to label to say this is an AI generated work, this is an AI assisted work, or it's a human led. So in the case of if Coca-Cola is reproducing its content via AI generated assisted, working with creative agencies, for instance, those from an EU AI Act has to be labeled. That's number one. And number two, there's also Article 53, where from an EU AI Act standpoint, you also have to ensure the data set that is being used by all these AI companies are actually licensed. So you have to disclose it as well. In a summary, where has this source of data sets come from? And even from an output angle. So as you can see, it's a quiet revolution that is coming in, especially when EU is leading it, and the likes of in the US from I think it's called CCPA, if I'm not mistaken, California Acts of are also looking at from an AI disclosure angle on how to mitigate on AI content perspective. So when the regulations is moving in, this is where a lot of the lawsuits and litigation cases happen, as you may have seen even in the GDPR, in 2010 and above, where GDPR started to be really enforced, and all these tech companies are getting into GDPR lawsuits, security and all this thing. And where we are right now, because you can see we are in an AI bubble. Bubble is great.
Are we? It depends how you define bubble, though, right?
Well, depends how you define bubble, but I still think we are still on the cusp of it, possibly on the AI bubble. My opinion on this.
So where's the bubble itself? Is it manifesting it in investment prices? Is it just manifesting it in the growth or lack of growth in the AI? But like, where's this bubble manifesting itself? What does it look like?
Very good question. I think that's definitely now in investment prices because a lot of liquidity are going towards it. But from growth, I believe we are going through a bit of a not stagnant, but coming towards looking at where the distribution of this AI can actually be whole, which is why all these tools that are built on the likes of infrastructure, LLMs, and etc., are going to actually create distribution and demand. That's what it is at the end of the day. Without distribution and the recurring usage of it, the bubble will blow up. We know that. So yeah, that's why from EU AI Act, transparency obligations are coming, and disclosing it is no longer optional.
Okay. Hanis, I'm going to thank you so much for coming, for spending so much time with us, for coming and doing this today. I really appreciate your time. Your energy is contagious, and that's really nice.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. I hope everyone's able to learn something about the future of IP, especially in the AI world.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye for now. Okay, that is it today for ATP Insights. Thank you to everyone who joined us, and for everybody who's watching this after it has been posted on YouTube. As always, give us a thumbs up on the video, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, and follow us on all of our socials on X, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn. Comments. The more comments you give us, the better off we are. Ask us questions. We love having questions directly. Again, thank you to Martin Runford, without whom this would not be possible. My name is Michael Waits. I am going to say goodbye for now and see you back here on Monday. Thank you again.